So I'm watching, though, closely how AI can really help us improve and not conflict with healthy learning and working conditions, because that's what I am passionate about.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by the second edition of my book, EdTech Essentials. My updated book from ASCD and ISTE is perfect for kicking off the 2024 school year. It features 2 new essentials on the impact of AI in education, almost 100 chatbot prompts to try, and much more. The second edition of EdTech Essentials is now available on Amazon. Visit my website at classtechtips.com/books to learn more. This week's episode is titled AI for School Leaders with Dr. Vickie Echols. Vickie is a former teacher, campus administrator, and elementary school principal, and she has a brand new book coming out next month from ISTE called AI for School Leaders, 62 Ways to Lighten Your Workload and Focus on What Matters. When I heard about her new book, I knew she would be a great guest for the podcast. I'm excited for you to hear our conversation and Vickie's practical tips. Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to dive into this topic of AI for school leaders. But before we jump into that, I would love for listeners to hear a bit from you about your role in education. What does your day-to-day look like?
Hi, Monica. Yeah, thanks for having me on this podcast. It's quite exciting. Yeah, I'm Vickie Echols, and I'm currently a coach with Wellness for Educators. This is an international nonprofit founded by Dr. Catherine Kennedy, and we support educators with strategies, mental, physical, social, emotional health, and well-being, right? So my day-to-day is about supporting educators of all kinds, and especially through webinars for school leaders. Most recently, we're focused on boosting well-being in schools like we need it, right? Mm-hmm. I work with an amazing team, a licensed social worker who specializes in trauma and healing, and also an LPC and registered play therapist. Tara and Stephanie help really complement what I offer, which is as an educator on this team. And we just work as bringing together some practical ways to essentially find balance in the work and the life. It's a very stressful profession. We offer webinars, book studies, micro courses, similar to what you're doing, which is, so needed. And really our goal is just to give leaders and educators the tools for a healthy environment. I wish I'd known how important wellness and well-being was when I first started my career, right? Decades ago. So that's kind of where I am.
And, that's such an important connection to this idea of AI and AI for school leaders. Mm-hmm. I know, this year and a half, I guess, has been a busy one for me in that same mode of how can we save time? How can we make room for a deep breath and yes. AI really help that. So as we, talk about this concept of AI for school leaders today, which is also the title of your new book from ISTE, what inspired you to write AI for school leaders, and how did your experience, right, really shape the content of this book?
Well, I'm sure you're aware AI isn't new, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to it really until ChatGPT came out, the free platform with generative AI. And, my husband saw the announcement. He casually mentioned I should check it out. And, those who know me will not be surprised that I dove deep. I was just really blown away, especially at how fast it processes information. I was just really excited. And, I mainly focused in on learning ChatGPT because it was first, and then Gemini and Claude. And as I began using, what they're calling the large language models, I was just so surprised at how easy and user-friendly it was. So it gave me the idea, AI for school leaders. And because I saw potential here to essentially transform the way leaders work. I loved my role as a principal and as a lead teacher, as a department chair, but it was challenging because I was trying to find this work-life balance. And so I thought this book could dive into these topics and really, get an idea of how to use technology for collective good and personal well-being. And I wrote it with school administrators in mind, but I think it does apply to the classroom because teachers are leaders, right? Campuses, departments, even central office and the boardroom. We need everyone to be aware. Yeah.
And that idea of awareness of what's out there and what's available, how user-friendly some of these tools can be, like the chatbots that you mentioned, and just the ability to take action connected to our to-do list, right? All the things like you mentioned from your experiences, right, that take up a lot of time for a school leader or anyone, right, who has a leadership aspect of their role is so massive. And you feature dozens of strategies in your book, over 60 of them. And I'd love to hear, and for listeners to hear, a bit about a few, maybe some standouts or ones that would be easy for them to wrap their head around. Do you have any favorites you can share with listeners?
It is hard to narrow it down, but I just kind of got excited. Well, okay. So what I try to do is organize it into 7 chapters. And the first 2 essentially are just how to use generative AI if it's new, and then how to stay smart. And it's kind of funny. I was writing it, and thinking, okay, I know we've got to put in the information about how to stay safe with it, because there are some ethical and safe practices. But so I included some information there, but I wanted to really dive in on how to use it through 5 themes I really appreciate through the Wallace Foundation, and also with ISTE standards, because they're very, good ways to align the practices. So I present these ideas as a problem, a solution, an example of a prompt. Sometimes I include additional prompts through acceleration, and then some cautions. So let me give you 3 examples. One chapter focuses on personalized professional learning. This was an easy one to me because AI is an incredible learning coach. It offers a lot of recommendations and guidance. And, when you think about it as a conversation with this machine, it's not a real person, but it can really sound like one. It can really customize what you want to learn. So here's an example of a prompt. Ask me 3 to 5 questions about what I want to learn. And then insert your role as a principal, as a lead teacher, as a custodian, head of custodian. Just use my answers to generate a list of professional resources related to the topics in my answers. I put that in the prompt, and it begins the conversation.
Love it.
I also added in focus on latest strategies, so it's current best practices. And it really pulls from a wide variety to begin the conversation. And it's kind of like Siri and Alexa, but it's smarter. And it doesn't always give the response I want at first. I can just change that up, right? I can ask for a specific number. I can say, try again. It never gets tired. And so
great tips there. Yeah. Keep
right.
Yeah.
So I also, book studies are popular. So that's another way to organize them. Checklists. Incredible with checklists, writing goals, whether it's with individuals, or with the group. Another chapter I focus on is collaborative decision making. I remember the first time I was the first day of my role as a campus principal, that adage, lonely at the top, it was not far off. And I kind of struggled with decisions, but what I wish I'd had was a tool like AI so I could help learn how to collaborate with the team.
Mm-hmm.
It can help guide decisions about norms, how to build consensus, generate ideas for a plan. Like, here's an example: generate a set of 5 reflective prompts and questions for a department team to discuss about working as a team, and begin with questions to help the group connect. Because what I've found is, it takes time to cultivate this sense of trust among each other and being able to build that culture of understanding. And I think, you could spend a lot of time making up those questions, but this speed gives you more time to focus on just what matters most, which is the facilitating, right? Really taking it into the conversation. And speaking of relationships and trust, I've also got examples of how to give structured feedback. It really gives you some good templates for how to do that, how to celebrate, and support others, even restorative circles to dig into delicate issues. I was really happy with what the things that I found and uncover. And it's a little thing, but I think you mentioned this in one of your online free ebook about writing an email, and just doing a simple gratitude, which it's really important, but it takes time. Yeah. So I found that it really helps to give that, speed up the process, but then tweaking it, of course, and not including names is important, but it gives me a chance to really dig in. I also mentioned data management, surveys, family, community engagement. It's a lot that it can do to improve communication. Really find that effective leadership experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. All the time-saving pieces that you mentioned, like, we know this is important, like writing an email, thank you, but this might be able to help us get to that thing, right, on our to-do list. And, you shared some helpful tips for prompt generation too, the ask me questions, right? Have the chatbot ask you questions that can help that back and forth, or to refine the prompt, or share a bit about your role, right, to provide that extra context. And, those actionable strategies, like the ones you mentioned, like the ones, in your book, I think once we start to wrap our head around those possibilities, particularly for someone who maybe has been hesitant to try this out, like, once you see that, you can't unsee it, right? Now that there's this tool out there that can really help you accomplish some great things. So, how do you envision AI, maybe it's a chatbot, like one of the ones you mentioned, transforming the productivity and the well-being of educators and school leaders?
Exactly. That's the balance right there, the workload, balancing out. I read this interesting statistic that school leaders spend about 60% of their time on administrative tasks, right? Personal time is really, it's hard to find if you're making those decisions about budget, personnel, paperwork. I would come in late, come in early or stay late, and try to get the important work done of connecting during the day. But it's just hard to stay balanced. So what I see is, really finding a way that you can adapt your role and get that productivity to apply to it. Because stress can totally impair the job. And so what I see is that AI can really free up time to invest in those human interactions, really also to focus on their own well-being. And even though I'm, that one more thing to learn is usually what comes to mind, right? I don't have time to learn about the AI right now. I get that. There's a lot on our plates, but that to me is exactly why we want to lean in and look at it, really, because if we can understand how to focus on what matters, it will impact everyone we work with. And really, those are the ideas that in my book that I use as a starting point. just to automate the mundane and elevate the humane. It's what one author put it. I loved it.
I like that comparison. And what you said about acknowledging the time investment, right? This upfront investment, we don't want to pretend like it's a magic switch, right? You need a moment to take a deep breath, understand what's possible, look at your current routines, look at your to-do list, decide what you can delegate right to this AI tool.
Exactly.
But anyone who's ever been in a leadership role has a story about delegating a task to someone and how wild it was to get it off their plate, right? There may be someone else who's better suited, more excited, right, about a particular task that's not your favorite. If you find that person and they can help take it on, right, you don't have to think about that again. And I think that's a big part of it too. Like, you do have to teach this thing. Maybe that's the way of framing it, or write that great prompt, or identify that part of your workflow, kind of however you want to, wrap your head around it. And once you do that first heavy lift, right, it's compounding in terms of how much time you can save. And I totally get that, right? Like that idea of hesitancy of carving out the time up front because we already don't feel like we have enough time, but then really reaping the rewards, afterwards. So, that's one challenge for sure, right? Is getting over that initial hump. What are some other challenges that school leaders face today, as they're looking at AI, as they're thinking about the impact on teaching and learning and their own productivity behind the scenes?
So true. So true. There are a lot of challenges that go into thinking about this process, this transformation. But I think one of the biggest is really distinguishing between a suggestion and an implementation, right? Because that's how I look at AI. It offers some excellent suggestions, but what matters is how you apply those ideas. And that at any level. So I kind of like to think about it like a party. I'm going to get AI to get me the menu, the recipes, the table decorations, all the music. But my skill is selecting what's going to be used, and ensuring that everybody has a connection and makes a difference. So, but I know that it also is that the safety and the way that we use it has to be, conform to what regulations we want to see. And one of them is, just looking at that safety first, really getting the technology use policy, which is common on every campus, but we've got to incorporate AI into that. Getting as part of our data protection, really not letting a human judgment replace AI suggestions. We've got to continue to be critical thinkers. I've been reading a lot about bias. Whoever programs these machines, they're going to come with their own set of perspectives. So we've got to look at how those may be programmed in, and certainly access. That's a biggie in our country. We've got to be able to find ways for everyone to have a way to learn, as you said, be educated through access. And I think the most important one is looking at accuracy. Right now, I know it's going to improve, right? It already has. Every day you look, something's changing, but it's important to really dive in. I'm going to ask you to put in the show notes a couple of resources, the guidelines that have just been put out by the Department of Education's office on EdTech, and then ISTE standards are really good to use when you're developing your foundational structure for AI. Certainly, these are ways we can harness the real power, right? And use it effectively.
Yeah, both great resources that I will absolutely link out. And, the challenges that you mentioned are ones I'm hearing people tackle, educators talk about trying to figure out, like, what does this mean for us, right? How can we acknowledge these things that might not be in our control because we're not making, right, these particular tools, but if we're vetting them, right, that is something, right, we can control. So, definitely a piece that, I'm thinking about as we have these conversations as well. So, I can't help but ask you, what are you watching closely right now, right, when it comes to the use of AI in schools, and how do you see the role of AI evolving in education over the next couple of years? Kind of a now and then a future question.
It's like we mentioned earlier, It's just changing constantly. In fact, they're saying it's doubling every 6 months in the capacity. And so I'm watching, though, closely how AI can really help us improve and not conflict with healthy learning and working conditions, because that's what I am passionate about. I really want to see it become more prominent, but in a way that helps us improve, right? And to how students can learn and how employees can work, in a better way. I'm noticing a lot of companies integrating AI into the platforms. Like we mentioned, Google has Gemini, but it's also integrated in Gmail. Canva's got it. Zoom's got it. I mean, Monica, you highlight so many great resources, but it's like a fire hose of information.
Right?
That's why I'm glad for platforms like yours to help us sift through it. But I'm particularly interested in enhancing productivity and well-being because it's not additional. It's supportive, and in giving us a chance to automate those routines, right? And focusing on the meaningful relationships. That's what's got to happen so that our schools feel joyful places to learn. It's just so crucial that we don't overwhelm people, but we replace that human element. It's important in education that we just really get people to be the focus. And I'll tell you one other thing is I really know in the next few years, it's just going to be incredible. Mm-hmm. It's going fast. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I think that's been my kind of big future casting, if you will, or prediction, might not even be the right word, but that this is going to continue to move quickly. And it may be something that compounds, like you said, like getting smarter, stronger, whatever your word of choice is when describing these tools, right? Every 6 months, doubling, right? Is one of the things that I've heard people mention too. But I love the phrasing you use, right? That improve, not conflict, and keeping that in mind as we're making decisions on integrating tools, reviewing resources, and just developing an established best practices, right? As an organization, something I know a lot of school leaders are thinking about related to AI. So before we officially finish up though, Vickie, I want to make sure everyone knows where to go to connect with you and to learn about your new book that comes out next month in October. And so where can folks go? Where can listeners go to learn about your work and your book? I'll link out to everything, of course, but I want to make sure they hear it if they're on the move when they're listening to this episode.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So connecting with me can happen several ways. I've got a website offering information and updates on what I put in the book, some content there, and how to pre-order it, of course. But I'm also active on various social media platforms. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'll have a Facebook page and Instagram, and I like X, totally familiar, but I also like Threads. And I'm going to try to get some YouTube channel videos up, or I'd love to have people email me. Monica, I really hope to also stay in touch with you and to continue partnering. This is such a great audience. I mean, we have to be a community to learn together, right? And just if we're going to transform education into joyful places to learn, I know we do it better together. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your time and your actionable strategies that you shared today. It was so much fun chatting with Vickie for this episode. Let's finish up, as we always do, with a few key points to make this EdTech easy. Investing time to explore AI upfront can help you save time in the long run. AI tools can boost productivity as you tackle mundane tasks. The AI space is moving quickly, and now is the perfect time to jump in. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from today's episode, including all of the ways to connect with Dr. Vickie Echols, by heading to classtechtips.com/podcast and finding today's episode number 283. And if you follow along with me on Instagram, it's just @classtechtips. You can always send me a DM or message there if you're looking for something special, like, what was that episode, Monica? Or what was the thing that so-and-so mentioned? I'll get right back to you with a quick Instagram DM. This episode is sponsored by the second edition of my book, EdTech Essentials. My updated book from ASCD and ISTE is perfect for kicking off the 2024 school year. It features 2 new essentials on the impact of AI in education, almost 100 chatbot prompts to try, and much more. The second edition of EdTech Essentials is now available on Amazon. Visit my website at classtechtips.com/books to learn more. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.